Welcome to the Cambridge Assessment Podcast. I'm Ashley Capaldi and I'm here to introduce a special 3-part series guest hosted by Paul Ellis and Melanie Dunn. According to the UN Refugee Agency, there are currently 4 million refugee children out of school. One of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. In this second episode, we hear from Lee Benbow, Peter Johnston and Sol Escobar from our Refugee Support Committee, who have taken their refugee support efforts outside of the workplace and into the refugee camps of Europe.
In the second of our podcasts in this series, we are talking to 3 of our colleagues from Cambridge Assessment who have been volunteering their time to help with refugee charities in Calais. In this podcast, Sol, Peter and Lee are going to tell us more about their experiences. First of all, though, let's meet them, starting with Sol. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. I'm Sol, and I work in the in assessment in Cambridge International in the languages group.
Thank you. Lee?
Hi, I'm Lee. I'm working in Cambridge International as well in the assessment group as an analyst.
Thank you. And Pete?
Hi, Paul. So I'm Peter Johnston. I also work for Cambridge International as an English assessment manager.
Excellent, thank you very much. Welcome to the podcast. First question, very basic, straightforward question, but it might have a complex answer. How did you become involved with volunteering in Calais? Lee, how did you become involved?
So actually, I attended a lunchtime workshop that Sol had arranged. I had recently joined Cambridge Assessment. I was looking for a way to kind of meet new people and to use my time positively. So I went along to the session that Sol had arranged, heard about the convoy to Calais, and kind of signed up pretty much within the week to drive down there, which was a bit of a challenge. My first time driving on the wrong side of the road, but it was great fun. Yeah.
You live to tell the tale anyway.
Yes.
Great. And you, Pete, what did you do?
Well, so Sol and I were both looking for a way to get involved in doing something, and so we looked around for what charities there are in Cambridge and able to do that, and Cam Craig was the charity that we worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Cambridge Convoy Refugee Action Group.
Mm-hmm.
And they just made it very, very easy in the way that Lee describes there. So the idea that he had the notion to do it and then a week later was doing it, that's pretty similar to our experience as well, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Sol, you're instrumental in this, obviously.
I guess, yes. So basically, as Pete said, we were looking for something to do, and we wanted to volunteer with a charity in Cambridge. We started looking and Googling, and we came across this charity that organises trips down to Calais with a group of people. We thought that would be a great way to start volunteering because, as Pete said, they do make it very easy. You sign up, they assign you to a car, you go on Friday after work, come back on Sunday, spend 2 days in Calais doing whatever needs to be done, basically. And after going down there the first time, after coming back, it made such an impact on me, going down there and seeing with my own eyes what was happening, which was nothing like what you read on the media. And so when we came back, we decided to tell people about it at work. And so we arranged, as Lee said, a lunchtime chat, I would say. And yes, we put it in the internal social media pages that we have, Yama, and we invited colleagues, and about 20 people came, one of which was Lee, and other people that came to this chat as well are now part of our Refugee Support Committee. Basically we just talked about our experience going down there and how people could get involved, and some people did. It was great.
And Peter, what's the situation now in Calais? Because the jungle was dismantled back in 2016. So who are the refugees?
Okay, so it's people from any place really where they need to flee conflict or persecution or anything like that. So it's people from places like Eritrea or South Sudan or Afghanistan, Syria, the general groups. But so whereas when the jungle was going up until 2016, as you say, it was all in one place. Now they're dispersed across parts of Calais and Dunkirk in the forests, under bridges, behind industrial buildings, places like that for the most part.
Yes, and basically the only support that they get are the charities down there and the volunteers that go there. So there are long-term volunteers that can stay from a few weeks to months, and that help the most there. And then there are groups of volunteers, like for example this convoy group that gets together 20-25 people, sometimes 30, and we go for a weekend to sort of relieve the long-term volunteers so that they can take a break, because their work is very intense. And so we go down there, we sort donations, we cook thousands of meals, we distribute food, we do what needs to be done.
And do you have any idea how many refugees are there at any time?
I think last time we went down, they were performing a kind of a mini census, and they said around 2,000, if I'm correct in that.
Certainly the census that was done last year, it was 1,300, so if it's gone up to about 2,000 now, then it's increasing.
Yeah.
It was about 8,000 at the peak of the jungle, so that's 3 years ago. Of course, it's a bit more difficult to
count,
perform a census when people are so dispersed now. And of course, there's quite a lot of institutional reaction against it, governmental initiatives to get rid of the people that are there. So, the dispersion is wider than you might think from those numbers. Yeah.
I think another thing is the diversity of people down there. I think there's roughly around 20 different nationalities, all sort of living in very challenging conditions, and that sort of brings its own problems sort of within the refugee community, because you're, effectively kind of living out in tents with people that you sort of didn't grow up with. They have different values from your own, and that can maybe cause tensions down there. So
and to add to that as well, they have a lot of resistance from police, and they face police brutality every week and have everything taken away from them. And so, for example, when we go to volunteer there, every morning there's a briefing where the long-term volunteers that have been out in the field the night before will give an update of what the situation is. So they will say which locations have been targeted, which communities need more support on that day. So we will get everything ready to take tents to those who had their tents taken away, kind of thing. So this is something that happens almost on a daily basis.
So a lot of the purpose of us being there is to replenish those things that have been taken away by the authorities, which it sounds absurd. As an enterprise, but it needs to be done, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you give us a picture of what you see when you arrive in Calais?
Yeah, so I guess first impressions coming off the Eurotunnel is a lot of fences, huge fences, large concrete walls sort of everywhere around the port, and then you drive sort of into Calais, and it's kind of just a fairly normal seaside type of town.
Calais is actually a really beautiful city.
Yeah.
Once you get to, and when Lee mentions the fences and the walls, it's not just that it's a straight system of walls and fences. It's this labyrinth. The difficulty of getting through there on your first time. Yeah. I think that's quite difficult, as I'm sure everybody does.
Yeah.
To find their way through to where you end up, which is the quaint seaside town of Calais.
Yeah.
And then going from so when we arrive there, we stay in a youth hostel, and then when we go on the day to the warehouse, it's kind of like out in an industrial park area. So there's a few different warehouses down the road. It's very quiet. So you drive in. It's the warehouse itself is gated. There's a barrier there to obviously control people entering the site. So they're very conscious of security on the site, so that all of the volunteers there have a safe atmosphere where they can, do what needs to be done for the refugees that day. And the warehouse itself is as you would imagine, it's a large warehouse. There's a bit of sort of outside scrubland. There's sort of obvious things like if with a kitchen there's a load of waste. The waste from the kitchen goes back to the local farmers that often donate a lot of the food. So there's kind of.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, I think, that the type of the volunteering that we do with this particular group, and there are many charities that work down there. So we support a few particular ones. So Help Refugees UK, we support Refugee Community Kitchen, Utopia 56, all of these are all together on the same site, and volunteers go to this site. That we're not dispersed around the city. Basically, most volunteers, we work all together, either sorting donations or cooking or chopping wood or fixing tents, etc. Normally, it's the long-term volunteers that do the distribution of these goods, because you need to have some sort of training to deal in these situations with the people on the ground. So after a few times having been there, for example, I went to distribute food, but we had quite an extensive briefing beforehand to explain the situation, where people come from, how to behave, what to expect. The first time, I went to distribute food a couple of times, but the first time, one of the things that hit me the most, that one of the long-term volunteers organising it said, was, just look at them in the eyes and smile and say hi and ask them what they want to eat. Give them some sort of agency to choose what they want. And it made such a difference. Just talking to people and hearing their stories. Sometimes they just want to come and have a chat, and we sit down with them and have some food at the end when we're done distributing food, and they just want to talk.
Yeah, so I mean, as Sol says, most people that go there for the first time probably won't go out on distribution.
No, exactly.
But so just to add to what Lee was saying before about what the warehouse is like, so I suppose the first thing that does strike you when you get there at 9 a.m. on the Saturday, having stayed at the youth hostel the night before, is bleary-eyed people, all ages, ready for another hard day of work. Many of them have been doing it for a long time, but just this real sense of community that's there amongst all these different groups, all different nationalities. It's just amazing, really. And you do this big warm-up, few games at the start, sort of starts to sound a little bit cheesy, perhaps, but it's there is a real sense of community and fun and working towards a common goal and all that kind of thing. And then you enter into the warehouse, and it's this huge, colourful place with, they've tidied it up the best they can from the day before, but it's a place of work, really, where there's a kitchen run by these really competent,
chefs and
yeah,
and it's great, and there's loud music, and everyone is having fun, actually.
Yeah, definitely. There's a really fun atmosphere in there, as much as
great,
anything else.
Yeah.
And why is it that the police would dismantle the tents and so forth, and as you said, they dismantled the jungle, but they allow the charities to operate there?
I think it's a sort of a complex question. There's, from my understanding, the French government are trying to create a hostile environment down there towards refugees to try and discourage people from going to Calais. But at the other side, there is basic human rights, and the charities down there legally are allowed to distribute clothes, food, essential items to the refugees. So there certainly does seem to be like a conflict between, on the one hand, the government is acting in one way to try and sort of discourage refugees from being in Calais, but then at the same time, they're human beings and they have
what is
rights
the option?
Like everyone else.
If no one, if the volunteers weren't there and if the charities weren't there to help them out, there would be nothing.
It's really just sort of a kind of a perverse grey area of the legalities around it.
Yeah.
In that, as Lee says and as Sol says too, they do have responsibilities, but they won't go beyond those responsibilities, and in fact they'll make it such that whilst still fulfilling those responsibilities, they'll do everything they can to stop people making them do so, and that's it, really.
Yeah, so there are not with volunteers going there just for the weekend, because it's a very safe environment, but talking to the more long-term volunteers, there have been issues with police harassment of volunteers as well. So it is. They are trying to make a hostile environment for both refugees but also for volunteers.
You probably will have seen that there was a court case recently in France, which came to a conclusion in June, where because of some of this hostility that's been going on, they now have to provide showers and toilets and what's the other thing?
No, I can't remember.
Showers and toilets and water, that's it, to the refugees. So whilst they still can carry on with these same attitudes, there's a basic level of humanity they do have to provide legally now.
What sort of stories have you heard from the refugees that you've spoken to there, both about what they've been through and what they're hoping to do next?
So I've talked to different groups of refugees in the times that I've been distributing food. I personally didn't get a chance to talk very extensively with them, but the stories that I did hear, especially the last time that I was there and distributing food, there were quite a few people that had been deported back, that had spent a number of years in either Germany or the UK, had started their new lives, and they had their asylum claim renewal denied, and they were back where they had started. And you could obviously tell the disappointment and the sadness that they had, but there's such a variety of stories. They all have the commonality of fleeing conflict, persecution, etc. But in the journeys that we have listened to, and especially also those who came to talk during the Refugee Week, who talked about their journey in great detail, I think a lot of people are not actually aware what really goes on. So I do recommend to anyone listening to this who wants to know more to also listen to that talk that we have available.
I think in Calais in particular, it's a place where refugees kind of end up, and it's very much kind of an end of the line, and they can often be sort of like political hot potatoes in a way, in that they want to go to certain countries, to the UK for people in Calais, but they tend to be more problematic cases where, as Sol mentioned, speaking about people that have had sort of asylum rejected, I think with the sort of the EU legislation of the first safe country that a refugee arrives in, they should be granted the right to stay there. But for a lot of them, that's, the first place that they arrive in is not necessarily the place the destination that they want to be in for whatever reason. Maybe they've got family over in the UK. So I think quite often people can be in quite a sort of a state of last resort when you're in Calais. And obviously you hear infrequently on the news of crossings attempts that ultimately go wrong because they are kind of at that stage, the kind of really end of the line type place.
As you say, sort of geographically, we are the natural endpoint for people whose hope's been drained away from them. Somehow, at this point in our history, we still represent that hope for them, and this place in particular, well, it hopefully reinforces some of that. And if we can get the political will behind that too, then maybe that's going to keep that hope going, I guess, for people that don't have very much of it left.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note as well, when we were talking to some of the refugees that came to this talk, how they explained this whole notion and argument that why don't they stay in the first safe country they go to, but that first safe country might be have already welcomed 4 million refugees, or they don't have a way to work or to have papers, or they're in limbo and living in refugee camps in Greece or Turkey for years. So of course they're going to continue their journey. I mean, I am from South America. I never escaped persecution, and I didn't stay in the first country that I went to. I kept going until I found my home, and my home was here. And no one ever asked me why I didn't stay in the first country I came across. So obviously, as Abdullah says and Mer said, when we talked to them at the panel talk, they just want an education, they want to work, they want to be with their families, they want to be safe, but they also want a life. And a life is not always in the first country where you're not being chased. So that's where they get to when they're in Calais, trying to reach that goal.
And if anyone wants to find out more about how to help, where should they go to?
I think Camcrag would be a great place, especially for people local to Cambridge.
Yes, just for those who don't know what Camcrag means, it's the Cambridge Convoy Refugee Action Group. They're a great charity in Cambridge for anyone who's local.
And more widely, Help Refugees probably would be the best place to go.
Help Refugees UK, they do have a lot of initiatives, not only in northern France. They do sort of oversee this warehouse that we go to help out. Refugee Community Kitchen, they do deliver food. They're in London as well as northern France. And Help Refugees UK, they also work in Greece and Lebanon, so you can volunteer in other countries if you want to. There are a lot of charities that are doing some amazing work where governments are not.
And for those of you who aren't in the UK area, there's other opportunities elsewhere. If you go through the various UN agencies as well, there's plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, there's a lot of
their
information
website,
out there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for telling us about your experiences, and you'll be back there at some point soon, will you? Is that your plan?
September is the
September.
Yeah, we're thinking maybe
earlier.
we'll organise another one during the summer. The summer there are lots of people who are available, so there are a lot of refugees, there are a lot of volunteers. So this particular charity we volunteer with, they try to take people at the times when volunteers are low. So so we might go this summer, otherwise in September. We'll see. We just went actually before Refugee Week. We were there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Cambridge Assessment Podcast. You can find more on our website at www.cambridgeassessment.org.uk. Just search for Podcast Gallery. We're also on YouTube and iTunes. Leave us a comment wherever you're listening if you'd like to get in touch about any of our refugee support projects, and we'll get back to you.